So for the last part here, we're going to talk about the electron transport chain. And this is the last stage that is in cell respiration. So remember, all of these stages, we've had NAD plus getting reduced to NADH. So all of those are going to end up at these carrier proteins. And what's going to happen is they're going to drop off the electrons at these proteins, and the electrons are going to hop from place to place. So if we look here at this slide, this is showing it. And so all of these NADHs are ending up here. They're going to drop off the electrons. So now they're going to turn in NAD+. Okay? So that means 2 electrons and an H are ending up here. Now the electrons are going to be in this protein complex, but the hydrogens have to go somewhere. So what's going to happen is, as the electrons jump from one to the other and then jump over to here and over to here, they're going to give off energy. And that energy is going to cause those hydrogens, or H pluses, to get pumped over to one side of the membrane. So if you remember back when we talked about ATP synthase, which was an enzyme, what's going to happen is, remember, we had all those H pluses building up on one side of the membrane, and due to the laws of diffusion, they're going to want to go from high to low. What's going to happen is they're going to end up only being able to go through that ATP synthase, which is going to turn, and as it turns, it's going to make ATPs. So that's going to be the electron transport chain. This is just another picture of it showing the same thing. So you've got NADH, it's dropping off the electrons, so it's going to become NAD plus again. The H's are going to get pumped through these proteins, and the reason they're going to get pumped through them is because the electrons are passing from place to place. Now, what's going to happen is, of course, my phone is ringing. What's going to happen is that this whole process can't work without coenzymes. So you're going to have coenzymes that are going to shuttle electrons back and forth and back and forth. And you'll see that in this video I'm about to show you. So here, you can kind of follow what's going to happen. So there's the NADH dropping off the electrons. And what's going to happen is, there you can see the little carriers or coenzymes that are going to shuttle the electrons from one protein to the next. Every time they do that, that's going to produce energy that's going to push all those H pluses over to the other side of the membrane. So we're going to zoom in a second so you can actually see this in a little more detail. But this is the whole electron transport chain right now. So there's the NADH dropping off the electrons, and the electrons are just getting carried from place to place by those coenzymes. So eventually what's going to happen is water is going to be a byproduct. That's what's being produced here. And that's why when we breathe out in a lot of our processes, we have water. Now let's talk about these H pluses that are getting stuck on one side of the membrane. We're going to have a high concentration and a low on the other side, so they're going to want to go through, and the only way through is through that ATP synthase. And when they pass through it, it's going to create that turbine to turn and mechanical energy that's going to make ATP, which you see as the starbursts. So that's the electron transport chain. So if we go back to the notes, let's go through each section. So we talked about NADH, and those electrons are going to be carried by it, and it's going to drop them off, and the protons are going to get pumped across the membrane, and then that's going to be used by ATP synthase to make 32 to 34 total ATPs. So that's a lot more than any of the other ones that we were talking about. So building an electrochemical gradient, what this is talking about is how those protons were moving over to that one side of the membrane and getting trapped up there. And then what's going to happen is chemiosmosis is that process of the protons, or H pluses, coming back through that ATP synthase and causing it to turn. So that whole process is called chemiosmosis, and that's what makes the ATP. So you can see the re-entry through ATP synthase is going to drive the synthesis of ATP through the process of chemiosmosis. Okay, so that's the electron transport chain, and that's how aerobic respiration works. In this last video, we're going to talk about anaerobic respiration and also how fermentation works. And that's a little bit faster, so we'll get through that last part.